Hi everybody, welcome back to True Stories. I'm Andrea. I want to welcome everybody back, especially anybody new who's just watching one of our videos for the first time. And before we get into this case, I want to remind everybody to click follow and share. This is the case of Sarah PAYNE, a sweet 8-year-old girl who was found naked and partially scalped in a shallow grave 16 days after she was abducted. 8-year-old Sarah Evelyn Isabel PAYNE lived in Surrey, England, with her parents, Michael and Sarah PAYNE, 2 older brothers, Luke and Lee, and a little sister named Charlotte. She was described by her mom as a girly girl. She loved the color pink, flowers, and fairies. Little Sarah truly believed in fairy tales, and she would often bring her mom along for fairy hunts in the garden. On July 1st, 2000, the family went to visit their grandparents, who lived near the beach in West Sussex. But this fun family trip soon turned into their worst nightmare. It was a beautiful, perfect summer evening, and Sarah and her brothers and sisters were having a great time. They were running around playing hide and seek in the cornfields that were next to their grandparents' home. While running around through the cornfields, Sarah had accidentally fallen and hurt her leg. She got up crying and started running towards her grandparents' house. Her older brother Lee, who was 13, had seen her fall and hurt herself, and Lee, being the great big brother that he is, had followed right behind her. He wanted to make sure she was okay.
She beat me out of the field, walked around the road, which is 100 metres, if that. By the time I was there, she was gone. So it's literally 30 seconds, if that, behind her.
Unfortunately, this was the last time her brother Lee had seen her alive. When Lee couldn't find his sister, he ran straight to his grandparents' house to let them know what had happened. Immediately, the whole family went out and started searching the area, and they couldn't find Sarah anywhere. When they were unable to find her, they immediately called the police.
It's an emergency, what's the problem?
I've lost my 8-year-old daughter. She's been missing about an hour and 3/4 now.
Right. And was she playing with anybody at all?
She was playing with her brothers and her little sister, and she's sort of walked away from them.
And what's the name of the little one that's missing?
Sarah.
When the police arrived, they started talking to Sarah's siblings. At this time, Lee remembered seeing a white van. The white van was driven by a man that Lee described as unkempt. He said the man waved at him as he drove by. He didn't think anything of it at the time, but now he felt like it was important. The family and the police started to think that maybe the man in the white van had something to do with Sarah's disappearance. The community started a frantic search for little Sarah. They knew they needed to find her quickly, because after a certain amount of time, the odds of finding her alive become slimmer. It wasn't long before Sarah's disappearance was a nationwide news story, with her parents appearing on TV every single day, pleading for help finding their daughter.
Soft, gentle little girl. She hasn't got a horrible bone in her body. Somebody out there must have seen her. They must have seen her on that road. They must have seen her.
They were begging the person or people that took her to please return her safely. It wasn't long before lots of tips were coming in, including sightings of the girl possibly in a town called Cheshire. This lead turned out to be false. There was nothing to it, but this did give the family some hope that possibly their daughter was still alive out there somewhere.
We're going to find you, and you'll be home. You'll be home, darling.
Yeah, I'm still. We've got to try and keep our spirits up in some way.
Sadly for the family, their hope was crushed. On July 17th, 2000, when a tiny body was found in a shallow grave, she was naked, strangled, and a big portion of her hair had been pulled right out of her scalp. She was found in a place called Pulborough, which was only about 15 miles from her grandparents' house. The body was then identified as 8-year-old Sarah PAYNE.
The first thing I can confirm with you now is, as a result of the post-mortem that was carried out in the early hours of this morning, this is now a murder inquiry. The second thing that you will obviously be wishing to anticipate is that we have been able to identify that the body in the field half a mile from here is Sarah PAYNE's.
The autopsy report showed that Sarah suffered a very violent death. She was strangled and suffocated right up until the end. Because of the level of decomposition, the pathologist could tell that she was murdered the same day she was taken. I mean, what kind of monster would do this to such a beautiful, innocent little girl? This is now a murder investigation, and the police were determined to find the monster that did this. This was just a brutal murder of an innocent young girl. It didn't take long for police to have a suspect, a man named Roy Whitting. Roy was a known predator who had already been arrested for kidnapping and hurting an 8-year-old girl. If that doesn't set off alarm bells, I don't know what does. But unfortunately for that crime, instead of getting the life sentence that he deserved, he was only sentenced to 4 years. The reason for the light sentence, they said, was because he admitted to the crime. But even worse than that, he only ended up serving 2.5 years. And then he was released. The psychiatrist that assessed him after his release said that he was likely to be a reoffender. But he was released anyway, in November of 1997. After Roy was released, he was known to hang around a community swimming pool. So the police decided to keep an eye on him. When Sarah disappeared, the police decided to pay him a visit. They went to see him at his apartment, which was not that far from Sarah's grandparents' house. When detectives began to question him, he told them that from about 5:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. on the evening that Sarah disappeared, he was at a fun fair in another town about 20 miles away. But as he was talking to the detectives, as luck would have it, or maybe fate, a piece of paper fell out of Roy's pocket. One of the detectives bent over to pick it up, and it was actually a gas receipt. It appears that Roy had purchased gas on July 1st at a garage in Coolham. This location is hours away from where Roy claimed he was. The timestamp on the receipt did not match any of Roy's story about his whereabouts on that day. So now, knowing that Roy was lying, they then arrested him on suspicion of abduction and brought him into the police station for more questioning. After questioning Roy for 3 days, the police couldn't find anything solid to charge him with, so they had to release him. On July 20th, 3 days after Sarah's body was found, somebody had called the police and said that they had found a black sandal that looked like it had belonged to a little girl. It had been sitting on the side of the road for days, and soon it was identified as belonging to Sarah PAYNE. On July 23rd, Roy stupidly decided to steal a car. The police ended up chasing him around town until he finally crashed into a parked car. For this, he was arrested and sentenced to 22 months in prison for theft and dangerous driving. This guy is definitely not the smartest criminal out there. Now, with Roy behind bars, this gave detectives plenty of time to search his van, a van of which he had only purchased 7 days before Sarah's disappearance. They found a long blonde strand of hair on a red sweatshirt, which tested positive for Sarah's DNA. Fibers from the red sweatshirt had also been found in the clump of hair that had been ripped off of Sarah's head. Not only that, but the fibers found on the lost shoe matched the passenger seat cover in the van. Now they knew they had more than enough evidence to charge Roy with Sarah's murder. However, despite all the evidence against him, Roy pleaded not guilty and the case went to trial. At the trial, the jury heard from several witnesses, including Sarah's older brother Lee, who testified about his interaction with Roy on the day of his sister's disappearance. There were 2 other witnesses that had testified seeing the white van at the location where Sarah's body was found on the evening of July 1st. On December 1st, 2001, after a 4-week trial, Roy was found guilty of the abduction and murder of Sarah PAYNE, and he was given a very well-deserved life sentence. He would have to serve 40 years in prison before he would be even eligible for parole, which would be in the year 2041 at the age of 82. But the story doesn't end there. After this trial, Roy's previous crime was revealed to the public, and everyone, especially Sarah's family, was outraged. How could he have been out on the streets, free to offend again? If he had been behind bars like he should have been, this may have never happened to Sarah. Why wasn't anybody keeping track of him? Why wasn't anybody watching him? Soon a campaign was launched by Sarah's mother, Sarah, asking the government to change the law. The law should allow citizens to know if there are any sex offenders or violent predators in their neighborhoods. She believed if this had been done earlier, her daughter may still be alive. Her campaign was backed by many major media outlets, who even started releasing names of offenders in the country. In 2011, her efforts finally paid off with the introduction of Sarah's Law, which was put across England and Wales. Soon, Sarah wrote a book called Sarah PAYNE, A Mother's Story, in which she talked about her daughter's murder and the campaign called Sarah's Law. The pain of losing their daughter in such a horrible way was too much for the family. At some point, Sarah's mother, Sarah, had a stroke that left her partially paralyzed. Her dad, Michael, had spiraled into depression and started drinking heavily. At one point, he was even arrested and jailed for several months after he attacked his own brother with a glass during a drunken incident. This caused a lot of tension in their marriage and ended with him and Sarah's mother getting divorced. Sadly, in 2014, Michael was found dead in his home after suffering an alcohol-related illness. This story is really tragic from beginning to end. What do you guys think? I just can't get over the fact that we have such horrible people in the world. Some of these stories are hard to listen to, and they're hard to research. But I like to tell them out of respect for the victims. The victims deserve to have their stories told and not be forgotten. That's what I think anyway. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any stories you want to hear. I'm always open to suggestions, even in the comments below. And most importantly, don't forget to click follow, like, and share. and I'll see you guys next time.